say that intro music, that country intro music, is exactly the type of thing I was hoping for. It really is catchy, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not
About
a lot of enthusiasm there. Anyhow,
We're all country fans.
I'm Jorge Edwards. Welcome to the Four-Eyed Pregame Show here for Week 13. We're going to be covering, as we do every single week, every single game, talking about players on offense, talking about players on defense. Before we get into all that, though, I want to welcome a guest to the show today. He has a YouTube channel, the Fantasy Football Huddle. Mr. Chris Holscher. How you doing, Chris?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, you guys.
No problem. How long have you been covering fantasy football?
5 years now. Just making videos, fantasy league, how to also improve your league, general videos, what fab is for people, especially that are beginners. Just a basic channel like that.
That's awesome. Everybody has to learn the basics and learn more about that. So that's really cool that you cover all these topics. Really comprehensive. Awesome follow. Go sign up and follow. Subscribe to him. Subscribe to his channel on YouTube, the Fantasy Football Huddle. And as always, we have the Frames crew and David. We got Nate. We got Todd. We got Teddy. We got Jonathan. We got Michael Bauer from the Dynasty Rewind podcast. I'm wearing your shirt, buddy. You see that?
You are a handsome man, Jorge. I'm just going to throw that out there.
It's a haircut.
Keep more of that. Anyhow, so let's get into business real quickly. You can find all of our content over at fantasyandframes.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube as well at Fantasy and Frames. Now, folks, the Four-Eyed Championships, our charity tournament that we did our drafts back in July, that you all have been really diligent about keeping your roster set. This is the last week of the regular season. And as you can see, scrolling at the bottom of your screen, the top 4 division winners head to the playoffs. And then just to reward people for having the highest number of points that they can possibly have, the next 4 people who join the division winners come from the entire tournament, the 4 highest scoring teams. So we're really excited about that, and we'll have those standings updated for you by Thursday when stat corrections go through. And basically keep setting your lineups. And you can check in real time how you're doing in the championship tournament playoffs over at fantasyandframes.com. So really excited about that. A lot of good charities after this Thursday, rather. We'll be receiving $100 towards, their foundation. And, of course, all the money that we generated from our GoFundMe page will be going to the overall grand prize winner as well. So with that, let's go into some football games. Let's talk about some fantasy options from the Saints and Falcons. Todd, your team, who's somebody that you like for this matchup? Start with wide receiver.
With wide receiver?
Yeah.
I probably am not liking Julio Jones actually this much this week. I know he's coming off another hammy injury, and we already saw last time after he took 1 week off and then they brought him back, he left the game early in the first half. So Julio Jones, I would probably shy away from. And honestly, I don't really like any of the wide receivers for New Orleans because Taysom Hill and the Saints are running the ball and they're running into the ground. So, even Alvin Kamara as a Saints wide receiver, he's basically a wide receiver for us in most games. He's only seen 3 targets since Taysom Hill's taken over at quarterback. So, and I know he's kind of coming off a foot injury, so that may come into play with it. But yeah, honestly, these receiving options for the Saints and then Julio Jones, I'm probably shying away from.
So are we thinking this is more of like a Calvin Ridley type of game?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. And but the big thing is, I think they want to suit up Julio anyway, just even as a decoy, because Matt Ryan is a different quarterback when Julio Jones is on the field.
Right. I think I saw this stat that when Julio and Calvin Ridley are both on the field, they both have top 5 or top 10 wide receiver weeks in fantasy point production. So they definitely could use them. And I also saw a news report today that Drew Brees is expected to be activated off of the IR and be ready for Philly next week, which is great for all the fantasy managers, all the Michael Thomas managers, all the Alvin Kamara managers. Like, relax, be happy. You're getting your guys just in time at their peak efficiency for the fantasy football playoffs. Nate, any IDP guys we have to cover here for this team, for these teams rather?
Well, Marcus Davenport is out for this week booms or inflates Trey Henderson, Cameron Jordan's stock. I'd start them anyway, but without Davenport, the rotation will be even heavier on Atlanta side. Deion Jones has played a lot better lately. I was down on him early, and he started to pick up the tackle volume. He's kind of, he's had a sack in 3 of the last 5 games now, so he's starting to get to the quarterback a little bit. We had 3 quarterback hits a couple weeks back, so he's putting the pressure. Foyesade Aluakan is another one who he's been consistent. He doesn't have those high peaks and valleys. And Keanu Neal, Grady Jarrett might actually have a decent matchup too, just because Taysom with that running game, as much as Todd was mentioning, I think that could be lead to a little bit heavier tackle volume for him.
Nice. And Mike, from a dynasty perspective, are there any players on these 2 teams that you're keeping an eye on? And of course, your mic is muted, Mike.
Sorry about that. I was doing something before. I didn't know what I was doing. The only guy I'm really seeing, this game is full of just start your studs guys. You know who you're starting. Marquez Callaway, who's currently on the injured reserves for the Saints. He's kind of like he's a younger downfield guy. So when some of these older wideouts leave, like blanking on the
Emmanuel Sanders.
Thank you, Emmanuel Sanders, maybe Traquan Smith, whatever, some sort of Smith. Whenever he leaves, Callaway could get a shot. If they get a quarterback like Jameis in there that could throw the ball down the field, Marquez Callaway could pay off big.
All right, very cool, very cool. Let's go down to our next matchup. And Chris, we're going to start it off with you. We got the Jaguars, we got the Vikings. Aside from James Robinson, is there anybody else on this Jaguars offense that you feel comfortable inserting into your lineup?
I'm not really sure about Chark this week. I mean, I don't really like his quarterback play with Mike Glennon going to be in there. The only person, outside of Robinson, obviously you're going to want to play Cook with Chubb putting up 144 yards last week against the Jaguars. So obviously Cook is always a must start, but this week is going to be probably a game winner for sure, especially if you're trying to get that number 1 or number 2 seed. If you have Cook, you should be fighting for that spot. If you didn't, I'm sorry that the rest of your team was not a good draft pick.
Nice. Teddy, from a wide receiving matchup, Chris just mentioned he's hesitant on DJ Chark just because of the quarterback matchup. What are your thoughts on Justin Jefferson this week, are there any other wide receivers that you should pay attention to from Minnesota?
So, I think it's still going to be back to the dynamic duo of Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson in the sense that, Thielen should be off the COVID list now. I think he's active for this one. So, Justin Jefferson has formed into a really good wide receiver alongside him. And even though Dalvin Cook, as we've mentioned, is probably going to be the bell cow back and get the ball probably every play. And I think Alexander Madison's out in this, so he might not leave it. So, obviously Cook is going to be the main staple of this offense, but I think they both are, fantasy relevant enough this week to make your lineup.
David, let me ask you, speaking of fantasy relevance, just because, for example, your skill players are great options at fantasy football doesn't mean your quarterback is. Is Kirk Cousins a good option this week against the Jaguars?
He's definitely a good option, especially in a pass-heavy league. So, last week he showed we can do 303 in the air. I definitely have no problem starting him. I tried to pick him up in one of my leagues and play him over Lamar Jackson, just to give you an example of my faith in Kirk Cousins this week.
Nice.
But unfortunately, he was taken. Didn't have enough fab. It's all good.
Oh, well, that sucks. Mike, from a dynasty,
do you really mean that? Do you really mean that?
Kind of, but not really. Is this the
I
same
feel like
league?
you don't care.
Is this the same league that you and I are competing for the final playoff spot in?
No, it's not. And I've got to get my act together. I think it's me, you, and Bob Long fighting for the 6th spot.
Yes, we are. Got a comment here from TCL14. Happy football day. Happy football day to you. Last day of their fantasy football regular season. I'm pumped up. This is going to be a fantastic day. Michael Bauer, Olabisi Johnson, wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. He came on in relief last week. He got you 12.9 fantasy points and half PPR scoring. Is he a dynasty person that we should be keeping an eye on or adding to our dynasty rosters?
Yeah, I would pick him up. Also, Alexander Madison is out. He did have an appendectomy. He could miss this week and next week. BC Johnson. I actually have a couple guys from this game I like. For the Jaguars, Laviska Shenault. Use the fact that he gets banged up. Acquire him cheaply. Also, Colin Johnson from the University of Texas. 4 for 96 and a touchdown last week. He was a 6th-round draft pick. I know everybody's down on the Jaguars offense, but Jay Gruden is their offensive coordinator. He is a good offensive mind. Jorge, you and I talked about in the offseason. And aside from that, for the Vikings, I like Irv Smith a lot. Next year is going to be his third year. Buy him now while he's still down. Third year tight end breakout is when you want to look out for. Also, TCO 14 is my man Trav. He's a great guy, great follow on Twitter as well.
Very nice. From
Mike,
an
I
IDP,
was thinking about you the other day. I saw this video of Melvin Gordon's his 400 and something yard college experience, and the guy who was trying to tackle him was your boy Nate Gary. And constantly, when he was playing for Nebraska, they're like, "Yeah, Nate Gary's got to do a better job of tackling Melvin Gordon." I'm like,
Really?
"Damn, I got to send this to Mike. I got to send it to Mike."
It's surprising that Nate Gary whiffed on attack.
for those who are unaware, Nate Gary is the linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles. That Michael Bauer is his number one fan.
I'll fight him. I never said I'll win, but I'll fight him. Just want to throw that out there, just to get him out of town. Say he assaulted me.
Mr. Markham, from an IDP perspective for the Jaguars, outside of Joe Schobert and potentially Miles Jack, is there anybody from an IDP perspective that we should be interested in adding to our rosters this week?
Josh Jones is back potentially. Not potentially. I think he is back. And from a safety perspective, prior to him leaving, he was, he's borderline DB, high DB2. Can't really say low DB1, but he's worth, especially with as weird that defensive back is, and we're losing a couple good ones with the bye weeks. So he's someone to pay attention to. Minnesota side is the Eric brothers, Wilson and Kendricks. Maybe Harrison Smith at defensive back is another one. Other than that, not much.
Okay.
Is this the last week of bye weeks?
Yes.
It is, okay.
Yes. And we have the Bucks and the Panthers on bye this week.
Correct.
All right. Let's go to now Tennessee. We're going to the Browns and Titans. Jonathan, we haven't heard from you. Who are you liking from Cleveland this week?
This is quite an interesting game because they're two of the most run-heavy teams in the league. But actually, if you look defensively, they give up some of the most points to wide receivers. I think the Browns give up the 8th most, and they've had 3 sort of crazy weather games in the last few weeks. So I think we could see some decent wide receiver scoring this week. I think Jarvis Landry is quite an interesting option here. He saw plenty of targets last week, so I think he could be quite a good option for people.
Todd, let's talk about wide receivers a little bit more. For the Titans, Corey Davis he's been okay. He's been one of those, like, you insert into your flex spot and you're like, all right, I feel okay with this. Like, I'm not happy about it, but I'm not upset about it either. What are your thoughts on Corey Davis this week, or is this the A.J. Brown show only?
No, you can't count Corey Davis out. He's done it week in and week out all season. He's had a 22% target share on the season. So, he gets the targets no matter what. And even with A.J. Brown on the field, his target share is actually just around 24%. So it's actually a little bit higher. So I don't hate Corey Brown at all. Corey Davis at all. I think he's a solid option, and he's done it literally week in and week out. Obviously, we see the big play to A.J. Brown every single week. It's just kind of a weekly occurrence now that A.J. Brown catches a big touchdown. But, hey, he's had 70, 113, and 67 yards in his last 3 games. So he's a solid option.
Teddy, let me talk to you about the tight end position for the Tennessee Titans. No Jonnu Smith this week. Anthony Ferkser, is he somebody that people should be paying attention to, getting off their waiver wire, plugging him into the lineup? The last time he took over for Jonnu, he put up like 20-something fantasy points, and he had the team lead in target share. Was that just an aberration, or is that something we can potentially hang our hat on this week?
When it comes to the tight end position, I think we say this week in and week out, if they have a pulse and they're like active out there, you got a chance, right? And so, like last week, I was high on Drew Sample for the Bengals, so you're probably going to take this, with a grain of salt. But I like him this week. Johnny Smith hasn't always been reliable week in and week out, but I think the tight end, like the targets for the tight end, has been there for the Titans every week. And so, there's a chance. So, why not? If you're feeling saucy, to take the chance, throw him out there. I know I am this week, so let's.
Jeff Swain's been getting more targets though. Is it Swain? Is that his name? Yeah, he got targeted last week.
He likes Ferkser in the end zone though.
Yeah, with Taylor Lewan out, I think they're asking Ferkser to block just a little bit more. But like you said, Teddy, I think the end zone or the red zone targets are going is the target, I guess, the single.
Yeah, Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question then. If you were the Gronk manager and he's on bye for you this week, would you plug in a Titans tight end, or would you rather look elsewhere?
I mean, I think it depends on who else you have. Like if you have the ability to have like Jared Cook or Ferkser, I would pick Ferkser personally because Taysom Hill doesn't know that Jared Cook exists. So I think that exactly. And so I think that I think depending on your situation, I think there's definitely ways that you can easily rationalize it. Just taking the chance.
What about you guys? What about Jordan Akins or Ferkser?
Akins.
Akins.
Because I feel like he'd get more red zone targets, and I think he ran 14 more routes than any tight end for Houston last week. So I think Akins is actually a solid option, and he's been a red zone target early on in the season when he was fully healthy on a weekly basis.
Hey, Chris, let me ask you a question real quick here. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, before Chubb got hurt, this duo was able to get you, 20 fantasy points apiece. Now Chubb's coming back. He's getting the bulk of the work. Kareem Hunt's kind of faded away. Could this be the start of Kareem Hunt's resurgence, or are we really concerned about even starting him on a week-to-week basis?
Oh, no, Chubb is an absolute, I think, safe play. I mean, when you have 3 back-to-back 100-yard games, you just keep riding that. I know it's tough. I know it's like trying to get 4 wins in a row on Warzone, but it's definitely doable for Chubb, and they love giving him the rock. I feel really bad for Chubb owners because they've had to deal with Kareem Hunt in the backfield, and he takes away so much, but he adds to the Browns game that they need him in there. But I think Chubb is a must start for sure. And Hunt, I think he could still be playable. I'm a little worried about him getting hurt last week, or a little dinged up, but I think they're both going to be fine this week.
And David, so Ryan Tannehill, what are your thoughts?
Oh God, why do you do this to me?
Just wanted to acknowledge that. Okay, Ryan Tannehill. He will finish as the quarterback 1. For Chris, you may not know, I am a huge Tannehill truther. I've been since the preseason, saying he will finish as the top 12 quarterback, and so far he's in the running for that. So
he's a safe play. I'm not expecting monster numbers from Tannehill, but he'll give you respectable numbers this week. I'm expecting about 250 in the air and 2.
All right. Michael Bauer, dynasty options in this game. What are you thinking?
I got a couple that I like. 2 wide receivers from the Cleveland Browns, Kadarius Hodge and Donovan Peoples-Jones. And for the Tennessee Titans, I like Darrington Evans. He was kind of a preseason darling. A lot of people thought that he was going to get a bunch of snaps behind Derrick Henry. And right now, their depth chart just bringing it up here. It's Derrick Henry, of course, Jeremy McNichols, Kahari Blasingame, Deonta Foreman, and Sonoris Perry. So I'm assuming that a lot of those guys sort of will be gone after the season. Hopefully Darrington Evans, who's on the reserve list, can get some snaps. You could probably get him for like $3 fab right now. So, and also just want to let you know, the 2 guys in the comments here are just trolling me. I know who they are.
Speaking of Donovan Peoples-Jones, one of our writers here, Jason, who does our forehead snapshot articles, which you could find scrolling at the bottom of the screen at fantasyandframes.com. He was profiling him and how he basically, when Odell Beckham Jr. went down that week, he came in relief. But he's technically a special teamer who's just never gotten the opportunity to climb up the ranks into a true wide receiver 1 or 2. So
watching Michigan tape, though, if he would have had a better quarterback, he would have probably been in the discussion to be drafted much higher. Coming out of high school, his athletic profile was just off the charts. And going to Michigan, who I think they're probably going to let Harbaugh go because he's just you're in Michigan. You should be getting these top recruits in and doing something with them, and he's just not. And this hurts me to say. I mean, I love it. I'm a Penn State fan. Also, Jorge, I want to let you know you're a Terrapins fan, right?
I am.
Did you know that Penn State is 43-1 all time against the Maryland Terrapins?
Do you know that the Maryland Terrapins beat Penn State this year?
We're talking all time right now, Jorge.
Yeah.
Game. I'm the dynasty.
Recent memory.
Recency bias, Jorge.
I hope my wife is watching because that's right. The Terrapins beat her Penn State. Line. All right. Anyhow, enough of that. Nate, IDP options, Browns picking slim pickings. All that thing.
I mean, I guess Myles Garrett's back, so that's a plug and play. But Tennessee, Jeffrey Simmons, I think is in play this week. There's no Jayon Brown again, of course, as we know he's on the IR, so that bumps up. Rashaan Evans has a heavier tackle volume with him out. Other than that, Harold Landry III. Harold Landry III's actually played extremely well lately. He's one of the, if you look at actually quarterback efficiency, well, not quarterback efficiency, it's rush efficiency at the quarterback. He's near the top in that. So sneaky good value with Harold Landry kind of going under the radar.
All right. Let's go over to Lions and Bears. And Chris, let's kick it off with you. Look, there's been a lot of buzz in the fantasy community about David Montgomery. When is he going to break out? How come he's so inefficient? How come this and that? But he keeps getting the opportunities. You know, Terry Cohen went down. We were hoping that more target volume would be going to David Montgomery. And then last week, he went off against the Green Bay Packers. He has a favorable schedule going forward. Is this the time to believe in David Montgomery?
Yes, I 100% believe if you're into David Montgomery, you bought in on him, this is going to be the game. Detroit is I believe, the worst fantasy team for running backs, or the best matchup. So he should score all over them. I think the Lions' morale is actually just hurting in general. When you have a locker room that's hurt, I don't know if you guys heard last week, even Matt Stafford was not even sure if he's going to be there next season. So,
yeah.
People don't know about his future. So when morale's down like that, you can really run all over a team. And I think David Montgomery's going to run all over that team.
Todd, who are some wide receivers we should be paying attention to from this game?
I know Marvin Jones had 12 targets last week, but I mean, going up against Chicago, they only allow 24.1 fantasy points to the position.
They cut Marvin Hall, didn't they?
They were talking about it. I don't know if they actually.
I don't know if they did yet. I did see talks about that though.
No, they did. For some reason, the guy's productive. They cut him. That seems like a very
They have Mohamed Sanu. They're good.
Yeah, that's good. I forgot about Mohamed Sanu. Sorry about that.
Everybody did.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of people that people have forgotten, who's the running back that we should be caring about for Detroit, Teddy? If anyone. Thank you. There you go. That's the answer I was looking for. Fantastic.
Is doubtful, so keep an eye on that one. But otherwise,
what's up, Chev? Good to see you. Let's go into Dynasty talk real quickly. Cephas, I forget his first name.
Quintez
Cephas.
I think he was a 5th, 6th round pick out of Wisconsin. Great blocker, which is good if they want to run the ball more. Also, whoever the Detroit Lions draft at running back next, I'm assuming Kerryon Johnson's going to be gone. Adrian Peterson's going to be gone. So you always want that backup if you're handcuffing DeAndre Swift. I'm trying not to put the obvious guys in there like, yeah, get DeAndre Swift, get Kenny Galladay. We know that. We all know who those guys are. For the Chicago Bears, the two guys I really like are Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet. Darnell Mooney, wide receiver, he's a 5th round pick. Can't remember the college. Cole Kmet, I think he was a 2nd rounder out of Notre Dame. So, these tight ends take a while to develop. Buy them when they're still developing.
David, let me ask you a question. We saw what Robert Tonyan, Mr. Funyan, was able to do against the Chicago Bears last week. He got into the end zone, got good yards after the catch. Could this be a big week for TJ Hawkinson?
It will be. I think I'm expecting 100 yards and at least 1 touchdown. Who else are they going to throw to? I mean, you've got no Galladay, no Hall. Mohamed Sanu is your number 2 wide receiver. That's scary times. Stafford is a great quarterback too. He doesn't get enough credit, to be honest. I actually really hope he does leave Detroit and go to a good team, like the Patriots, Super Bowl contending Patriots, where he can actually, shine. But I'm expecting him to get at least 10 targets. Definitely he's going to be a top 2, top 3 tight end this week.
Super Bowl contending Patriots.
They're going to win the Super Bowl this year, right? We're going to go on a run, and we're going to take it out. Okay.
Well, I'll write that one down.
Who do you think would actually win in a fight between a lion and a bear? I was trying to think about that.
I'm going to go with the lion. Go with the lion. The jungle type of thing. Nate,
come on, guys. Let's take bets.
Yeah, I'm going bear.
How are we?
Everyone go to YouTube. Lion versus bear.
I don't think
you're ready for you to shift your camera since you're outside and just have a lion and a bear and now let's watch.
Great. Oh my God.
It's illegal to do that in this country, man. To bet on animals fighting. This isn't Australia. Come on, dude.
Hey, Michael Vick did it. Michael Vick did it. Australia.
And he went to jail for it.
And now we circle back to the Michael Vick talk. By the way, it was you weren't here for us, Dave or Mike. Todd was awestruck at Michael Vick in the bathroom while he was taking a pee.
Yeah. That's the
I'll leave it at that.
conversation you guys pre-show.
Yep.
Quite a few years back.
That is how you set up a story without telling details, so it looks terrible. IDP talk about the Lions and the Bears. Real quick, before we go any further about that, is anybody else worried about the Adrian Peterson talk that he said that DeAndre Swift doesn't look right? He seems out of sorts after this concussion. That's
Who the hell was he
scary.
to say that?
Well,
He's like 74 years old.
I know, but I think
He was pre-med at Oklahoma, clearly.
but I mean, you can tell if a person's not right if they act
That's true.
discombobulated from that concussion. And I've seen people have these adverse reactions that lasted way too long from the concussion. Everybody's different, Our brains operate.
No, was
differently.
it Sterling Shepard last season?
Yeah, he was.
Well, he's been plagued with concussions, I think, for a majority of his time.
Yeah, but I remember last season specifically, he wasn't. He got one concussion. Actually, it was. I think it was the second one of the season, and I think he wasn't right for weeks on. So, I mean, yeah, concussions affect everyone differently. So
Right.
it is definitely something to monitor.
Yeah, it's definitely pull him aside. I mean, my background's healthcare, and head injuries are nothing to mess around with. So I really hope the Lions do the right thing and pull him from the game until
Same here.
He checks out, that he's back to normal. I mean, it can be very scary. I'm more still worried about AB. I think he has permanent brain damage.
Yeah,
Me too.
it's sad. But sorry, I got us off on there. As far as IDP Detroit,
You got us off on there? I don't think so.
I got it. Maybe you don't know what my hot takes are yet.
Oh, my God.
Jamie.
Phrasing.
Jamie.
It's a family show.
I have my wife here. Yeah, there you go.
And the first one is Romeo. Romeo Okwara is actually trending downwards. I'm not as high on Okwara as I was before. Jamie Collins, shockingly, has played a lot better. I didn't expect much going into the season, but he's been viable. On Chicago side, the obvious is Roquan Smith. Danny Trevathan's not as obvious, but he could be a good start here. Looking deeper into the back, and we don't know, like we said, I'm still waiting to see my phone, something about Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks. If anybody else knows anything prior to either one of those two, obviously fill us in. But then Eddie Jackson in the backfield is intriguing, especially like we said, with so many limited options for Detroit. It wouldn't shock me to see them have, Stafford chuck something up and maybe Eddie Jackson make a play on a ball.
Hey, let me ask you a question about those two players you mentioned, Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks.
Mhm.
When Hicks was in there, the offensive lines were really keying on Khalil Mack, which was really opening things up for Akeem Hicks. If they both are coming back and Akeem Hicks is 100% good to go, should we expect a down week potentially from Khalil Mack?
I mean, Khalil Mack has had nothing but, I would say, either highs or lows. There's not been that stable floor, which is bothering for me because it seems like you said they focus. I'm shocked, honestly, that Robert Quinn hasn't had more of an effect on either one of those two, personally. I mean, I thought that was just going to open up at least one of the two, or himself, but I haven't seen much of anything. I think that's the sentiment of the Chicago Bears. Chev, if you're still watching, no offense, I'm sorry, and all those superlatives for your team. But, yeah, I'm not as high. I'm hoping to hear something about Mac, so we'll see.
All right, let's go to
I still think Line gets the Achilles,
Oh my
and
God.
when the bear's down, he goes for the jugular. Game over after the jugular. That's my bet.
All right, let's go.
We can move
Let's take that bet and go to Miami, where I don't think gambling is legal in Miami. And we got the Bengals, we got the Dolphins. Let's start with somebody who was a resident Bengals fan for a while. Chris, who are we liking? And specifically, let me phrase a different question to you. What are your thoughts on T. Higgins this week?
Okay, absolutely. I'm glad you said T. Higgins. He's the only Bengals player really I am even willing to play this week. I'm not touching anybody else on the Bengals. If you're in a very deep league, you could try to go Boyd. You could try to go AJ Green. I actually thought AJ Green was going to be better this year, but I'm not liking anybody. Our offensive line is terrible. I can't play anybody for the Bengals. I mean, outside of Higgins.
Nate, let's jump up to IDP for you quickly for the Bengals. Let's just finish them off. Anybody from IDP purposes for Cincinnati?
I know it's a family show, but when you say finish them off,
All right, you had your thing, I had my thing. Okay, fair enough. We're even now. Okay.
Gross. As I mentioned, Sam Hubbard coming back. He came back, looked good in his first game, first full game back. Last year, maybe a mirage, I don't want to say last year, the early part of this year. Maybe he's starting to get better, pressure onto the quarterback. He's still kind of hit and miss, especially against Miami, because now I don't want to spoil it, or we're talking about Tua yet, but I'll I'll say I don't quite know what the effects of that's going to be on the defensive ends and the pass rush there. But Jesse Bates and Von Bell both, I think, defensive back relevant. I like Von Bell more than Jesse Bates lately, personally, but that might just be my 2 cents.
No, I think Bell is the strong safety, if I'm correct.
Mhm. Yeah.
So strong safeties play closer to the line of scrimmage more often, so more tackle opportunities. So that makes sense.
Are we not interested in Gio Bernard?
You guys might you might get there. I think Jorge's.
Yeah, I was going to ask a different question, but we can go with that. What are your thoughts on Gio Bernard, David?
Well, I'm just wondering if anyone's confident to play him. I mean, I got him in a few leagues, and I'm playing Benny Snell over him, playing Devontae Booker. I don't know. My confidence in Gio's been dropping a little bit lately. He started off filling in for Mixon as a low-end RB1, and now he's been, I don't know, average at best.
Yeah, he hasn't had more than 10 carries in the past 3 games, and he was never really – the Bengals never really trusted him to be that 3-bell running back. That's why they drafted Hill the next year after his rookie season. And I thought Gio was going to be great for us, but really it's been the only person to get it done on the ground game for Cincinnati has been Mixon the whole time.
Yeah. And of course, I'm sorry, on Miami's side, I think everybody knows at this point, Emmanuel Ogbah is a must start, especially against Cincinnati's O-line, as Chris was saying. Kyle Van Noy, Eric Rowe, both options, but start Ogbah with certainty.
All right, Teddy, let's talk about the Dolphins. We mentioned earlier Tua, he's going to be back. He's going to be starting. How much of this is a downgrade for Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki, or is it not? Does it not impact them at all?
So I think you're 1 for 2. So I think Devontae Parker has been shown to have value, he's basically quarterback proof when it comes to whoever's under center for the Dolphins. Gesicki, on the other hand, was definitely, as we saw from last week, was much more of a factor when Fitzmagic was under center. Tua, for some reason, I don't know if he's trying to prove that he doesn't need to check down to the tight end or whatever it might be, but he just hasn't really found that connection with Gesicki yet, so I've definitely lowered him when it comes to rankings this week. But again, with tight ends that we kind of talk about, it's take a shot and try. But I think it does impact his value, but Parker should be fine.
Gesicki or Ferkser?
I'd still go Gesicki.
Okay. Mike, any dynasty value here?
Yeah, I got a couple guys I like, actually. For Cincinnati, T. Higgins, he was basically a first-round pick. And on that note, Joe Burrow, I know there's people speculating he might not play next year, so get him now when you can afford him. And I still like Tyler Boyd. I think he's going to be a good dynasty asset for at least a couple more years. For the Dolphins, Preston Williams, wide receiver, and Mike Gesicki, who actually, I'm looking at their depth chart. He's number 2 on their depth chart right now behind Durham Smythe.
He's actually been number 2 on their depth chart since the beginning of the season, actually.
So weird. So
right? Little misdirection play right there.
Prime into that third-year breakout, everybody.
All right, let's go down to Houston. Colts, Texans. Notification from the Sleeper app just came across my phone. Jonathan Taylor is active. Jonathan, I like asking you this or that questions. Let's just go with the easy one. If you had to start one of these two, who would you start, Nyheim Hines or Jonathan Taylor? You're welcome.
Yeah, probably Jonathan Taylor. Because he's not coming off an injury, is he? I think he was
off the COVID list, right?
Yeah, I don't think he had it. I think it was just a close contact. So, yeah, I'll go Jonathan Taylor, but as you can see, it's not with confidence. We've seen this year he just hasn't quite lived up to expectations. But this is a really good matchup, and we've spoken before about how good the upcoming matchups are for the Colts for running backs.
Absolutely. Todd, wide receivers, T.Y. Hilton, I believe he had a touchdown last week. Are we looking at a repeat performance, or is this mostly going to be a Michael Pittman show? Or is it even going to be a Michael Pittman show? Everybody thought that Michael Pittman was going to go off last week. He didn't. Is this a bounce-back week for him?
I mean, if anything, we see that the running backs out the backfield and the tight ends get a lot of the work. I just can't – that's the thing is I just can't really trust anyone that Phillip Rivers is throwing to. Michael Pittman has 5 catches in the last 2 weeks, so you can't really trust him. And then T.Y. Hilton at this point in the season, if you're really trusting him to put him in your lineup, then I don't know. because he hasn't done it at all this season other than a couple games. And if you're relying on that touchdown from T.Y. Hilton, I mean, your guess is as good as mine as when it's going to come.
So I have a friend named George, totally unrelated to the show, and he has Michael Pittman and Cole Beasley that he's thinking about putting in at a flex. If you had to pick one of those wide receivers, who would you pick?
Tell George his team sounds like it sucks.
I will let George know.
I'm joking.
I'll tell him.
I'm joking.
Todd, who would you pick, Beasley or Pittman?
Honestly, against the Texans, I'm probably taking Pittman because against that 49ers defense, I mean, that looks like a pretty tough matchup for Cole Beasley this week.
Thank you, Todd.
Pittman has 27 targets the last 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like he's not being targeted.
Right.
He's just not catching the ball, which obviously, unfortunately, you don't get points for targets. Unless you play in that weird league that you get points for targets, or does George play in that type of stupid league?
George does not play in that type of league, from what I hear. Let's go, David.
Rumor has it.
David, yeah, rumor has it. David, you, Nate, and I were on the Fantasy Playbook podcast from Fantasy Data. We talk about every single game, every single fantasy player that's relevant. And we talked about Brandon Cooks this week. No Will Fuller. What are your thoughts on his potential upside?
I've got Brandon Cooks in a lot of leagues, and I'm actually a little bit worried about it, to be honest, because I really think that Brandon Cooks done his damage when Will Fuller was getting double coverage. So I just don't know if Cooks is the caliber of a player where he can, go up in the air and, in double coverage, snatch the ball, get yards after carry. It's a little bit dangerous, to be honest. I'm not expecting more than, maybe 80 scrimmage yards, and hopefully he finds the end zone.
Chris, David Johnson has been activated. He's back after missing a few weeks due to a concussion injury. What are your expectations for him this week?
They're not super high. I mean, I think he's going to be a running back 2 for you for sure, but I'm not depending on him. I mean, I like him than about a lot of other big plays this week. I mean, Indianapolis isn't like a terrible matchup for him. And if you look at it before that, he was getting an average of like 15 carries per game outside of the week he was hurt. So I think he's a safe play. I'm just not like, oh, he's a stud. I'm absolutely starting him. So if you have, like an Aaron Jones, Derrick Henry combination, you're going to rock that instead.
Right. No, of course. But like a good, like so flex level play, right?
Yeah. About as safe as floor as you're going to get, I think.
Okay.
I'm asking for a friend, right? Let me list off
what's your friend's name? I talked about my friend. Schmaven?
I feel like this game sucks.
It does. Listen to this, right? God. Here's a list of subpar running backs I got to choose from, right? It is Todd Gurley, David Johnson, Frank Gore, Devontae Booker, Benny Smells, who else? Or Le'Veon Bell if CH hits. Sits, sorry. Who would you go? Got to pick 2.
Give me Gore as one.
For me, those are my 2. Booker and David Johnson are my 2 on that list. Who else? Anybody else?
That's who I'm looking at.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think I'd go with that as well.
I just cannot.
A bit scared about Gurley this week.
Everyone's on that Booker bandwagon this week, and I just can't hop on it. I don't know why. It's just Devontae Booker, and I just can't trust him.
He was terrible in Denver. He was so bad.
He had a handful of RB1 weeks when CJ Anderson and him were there. I mean, they were both RB1s at a stage anyway. That was 2017.
Was that for like a quarter or for the whole game?
Right. Dynasty options for Colts and Texans. Mike, what are you thinking?
I'm just going to go out here and say I am not actively trying to acquire anyone from the Houston Texans. I mean, if I can get Deshaun Watson cheaply enough, but wide receiver core sucks. The running back core sucks. Their tight ends are so inconsistent. I don't want any of them. However, for the Indianapolis Colts, there's a lot of guys I like. Michael Pittman Jr., fantastic wide receiver. I think he's going to be great. Jonathan Taylor, of course, I want him. Paris Campbell is on IR. He's an explosive athlete, but he's been injury prone, so he's a guy I think you could acquire cheaply. And if you really want to take a dynasty deep dumpster dive, and you don't believe in any of the Colts tight ends because I don't, there's a guy on their injured reserve. His name is Noah Togiai. He played for Oregon State. He was a late-round draft pick of the Eagles. He was cut. That's how I know because I watched film on him. He's actually a pretty athletic guy, and obviously they would draft a better tight end, but if Frank Reich, who was the architect of the Eagles' 2017 Super Bowl run, if he wanted to run 2 tight end sets, Togiai would be their number 2 tight end. So he would be like the Dallas Goedert to the Zach Ertz, if you think about it that way. So he could be a throw-in guy in a trade, or he's probably on waivers.
But Zach Pascal, is it for dynasty purposes? Is he?
I like Zach Pascal too, but I think he's just going to get replaced. Honestly, Pittman's going to be their 1A. T.Y. Hilton might stick around a little bit more, and they'll probably look to upgrade the position. I do like Pascal, though. I think he's a throw-in in a trade, personally.
And this is why you should listen to the Dynasty Rewind podcast, because Mike is bringing the fire each and every week. Nate, for IDP purposes, what are we thinking?
Man, DeForest Buckner's back. I don't know if I love him in this particular game, but I like his. I like the fact that he's back on this offense this defense, because it opens up quite a bit more for Darius Leonard, who's been a must start ever since he came back, which is so refreshing, because those first 4 weeks of the season, I think it was disappointing. I was gonna say it wasn't, but it is. Call a
spade a spade.
Thank you very much for filling that.
You're welcome.
And then Kari Willis at safety is another one I like in this particular matchup. On Houston, as Mike said, there's not a lot of dynasty options. There's actually quite a bit of IDP options. JJ Watt is not really one of them, believe it or not. He's you can start him any given week, and it's JJ Watt. You never know. He could have a multi-sack week, but the consistent ones are Zach Cunningham. One of our favorites is Tyrell Adams, who's been lights out for pretty much the entire season, really since about week 4 on. And Justin Reed at safety is that stable floor that you're looking for.
All right, let's head to New York, the game that we're all looking forward to right now, folks. Got the Raiders, got the Jets. David, let's start with you. You mentioned as a potential option on your fantasy roster, Frank Gore is there. How confident are you in Frank Gore against this Raiders defense this week?
I actually do like Frank Gore for a safe floor. Gore and floor. Look, I think he's going to get 15 to 20 touches. You're probably expecting 60, 70 scrimmage yards. And if they can get, in the 2 or 3 yard region of the end zone, I do see him falling in and grabbing you another 6. So I think he's a safe play. I'm not expecting monster numbers, but if you're just looking for a stable running back, he's a good play.
Jonathan, should fantasy managers just write off Jamison Crowder? Just give it up, man. He's not going to be a thing the rest of the season? Or is there potential for him in this matchup?
I don't know. There's still part of me that thinks that he could be something. We've seen Sam Darnold target him at times, but I think we've sort of seen people like Denzel Mims. I'm sure Michael will go on to talk about him, but we've seen people like Mims sort of expand their role. So I'd be much more excited about Mims than Crowder for sure.
All right, Teddy, if you had to pick Frank Gore or Devontae Booker in this matchup in your flex.
Oh God,
I know this is horrible.
So I think I have to go with the floor of Gore because of the rhyming, but mainly just because when you're looking at Booker filling in, I think he's still going to have a good game, right? But I was one of the ones that started Brian Hill last week when Todd Gurley went down, so I'm pretty sure I still have PTSD about starting a backup over, when the star is out a game. So I don't feel necessarily great about either one. It's going to make you feel icky. But I guess for me, if you need the safe play, go with Gore.
I think for the Raiders, David, let me go back to you for a second. Derek Carr, is he startable this week?
He is. He had one bad game. We've seen Derek Carr over the year be pretty consistent. We've seen him, torch defenses for 300-plus yards and multiple touchdowns. He's got the weapons. He's got Ruggs. He's got Aguilar. They're talented guys. So I do believe in Derek Carr. It was just one of those games you need to forget about.
Todd, wide receivers. We just talked about a little bit Jamison Crowder and Denzel Mims. Who else should we be caring about? Where's that at?
On the Jets side, that's basically it. On the Raiders side, you have Henry Ruggs, Nelson Aguilar, but Nelson Aguilar is probably the safest bet. Derek Carr doesn't really hit the deep ball. Henry Ruggs and Derek Carr just haven't had that connection at all this year. But Nelson Aguilar has 11 catches and 50-plus yards in each of the last 2 games. So, that would be my safe bet on the wide receiver side for this game.
All right, and of course you're starting Darren Waller if you have him. Mike, from a dynasty perspective, who are you liking in this game?
So oddly, this is going to sound weird. I like more guys on the Jets than I do the Raiders.
You're right. That does sound weird. Yes.
Yeah.
The only guy I would try to actively acquire on the Raiders is Brian Edwards. I'm not a Henry Ruggs fan. I did say before the season, if you're a listener of the show, you can get KJ Hamler. They're going to give you almost the exact same production. You can get him 3 rounds later. Look at the numbers. It's pretty close last time I checked. So Brian Edwards is it for me for the Raiders. On the Jets, I like LaMichael Pirine. If you listen to the show, you know my love for LaMichael Pirine. He should be the starter next year. They need way more than running back, way more. So if you get a good year out of him, get a good half year. If you're not in contention, ship him off your roster. Love Denzel Mims a lot. Jameson Crowder's a guy I'm still going to actively try to acquire. And if Porkman's watching, I just want to say Braxton Berrios is trash.
I think Henry Ruggs is a very Mike Williams-esque player. So, if you need points, he's a decent play, for maybe getting 2 catches for 140 yards or so and, maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns,
But you try to look at consistency for fantasy football. I feel like Henry Ruggs is going to be a better NFL player that they could scheme around. He's going to take coverage away from some of the other guys. And to me, I want the guy like Brian Edwards is going to get, when healthy, 10, 11 targets. Henry Ruggs might get 3 targets. Now, Henry Ruggs' ceiling might be higher, but sometimes you just have to shoot for that safer floor. Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with you, but 2 boomer bust for me, man. Just way too boomer bust.
If you need points, I mean, if you're in one of those leagues where you're 7-5 and you're 200 points behind, he might be worth the risk. Hail Mary, cut a rug with Henry Ruggs. I reckon he'll do all right.
There's the pun. There's the one I was looking for. Fantastic. Nate, IDP for both of these teams. Let's start with the Jets. Let's get that out of the way. Who are we thinking about?
I'm not just thinking about him. Probably starting him in quite a bit of leagues is Quinnen Williams. Here is this 2019 first round pick. Last couple of weeks, I've paid attention to him. If you look just last week, he had 7 tackles, 1.5 sacks, a forced fumble. If we go a little bit further, over the last 4 games, he's had 17 tackles, 3 sacks, and 8 quarterback hits. So against the Raiders, not the best offensive line. I'm not necessarily too intimidated, and I'm not real worried about Booker, which also rhymes with hooker, and Gore, which rhymes with whore. So do you want Booker or Gore, a hooker or a whore? And since we're on that rhyming trend, IDP on the Raiders side, I'm going to can we have some decorum, please? Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, look at that. Quinnen Williams. I don't want to answer. I like Carlos Dunlap more, actually. I just went this 5-minute tirade about Quinnen Williams, and I'm going to have to answer Carlos Dunlap against him. Jeez, sorry, Jeremy.
If anyone listened to the Fantasy Playbook podcast on this, I think it was episode 2 this week, Nate tried to give Jorge a nickname and shorten Jorge to whore, and it did not work out.
It did work out. I called him that since then.
So just and also on that episode of the Fantasy Playbook podcast, I told people that the first time this has ever happened, somebody read my name and pronounced it Yorga as opposed to Jorge.
I love it.
Which I've never heard that before. So if we can get Yorga trending, that would be fantastic. All right. So I think that covers all the IDP stuff there. Remember, you can catch all your fantasy football and IDP content over at fantasyframes.com. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Fantasy and Frames. Let's go to the Pacific Northwest. We got the Giants. We got the Seahawks. Chris Carson, he was eased back into action last week. He got you that touchdown. Pete Carroll came out and said we were expecting more snaps and more action out of him. Do we believe that, Jonathan? Or is Carlos Hyde still going to have some relevance?
No, I think Chris Carson's going to be the man going forwards. I think we saw earlier in the season that, he is very clearly the best back there. I mean, the Giants are rolling with Colt McCoy today. I'm pretty sure Daniel Jones is out, yeah?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
I mean, the Seahawks are very clearly favorites. They don't need to throw on the Giants. So I think we'll see a big week from Chris Carson.
For that reason, I worry that Carson won't be used if they get up to a big lead. I think they need him come playoff time. So if we get a 3-touchdown lead, I think we're going to see a lot of Carlos Hyde, to be honest. It's my worry.
Todd, I'm going to give you the this or that question. Is it Tyler Lockett or is it DK Metcalf this week?
I mean, I'm going DK Metcalf week in and week out, honestly, with that answer.
He's a must start for you every week from going on?
I mean, over Tyler Lockett for sure. Tyler Lockett's just one of those guys where, I mean, he's going to have big games here and there. I mean, and he'll give you somewhat consistency of like 40 plus yards a week. But I mean, DK is the one that, I mean, he could be wide receiver 1 any given week. And so that's just kind of, I mean, when you watch him, he's a freak show, especially in man-to-man coverage. I think he's had like 300 plus yards more than any other wide receiver in man-to-man coverage. So, I mean, he's just, I mean, that's who I'm taking week in and week out.
Chris, for the Giants, who you liking? I know pickings are slim, or maybe not.
Actually, I thought that too. But if you actually look at Goldman, I mean, he's had 6 touchdowns in the past 6 games. And I don't know if you guys know this at all, but in the past 4 weeks, he's the running back 9, and that's including a bye week. So he's actually higher than that. So I think Goldman is actually a very safe play for people this week.
What about Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard?
Yeah, no, I think Evan Ingram is another great guy. I mean, he had a good game last week. He's been doing pretty well later this season rather than earlier. But no, I think Evan Ingram is also another guy you can play as well. I was just kind of in awe about Coleman on how well he's been doing, and also just about Lockett real quick. It's kind of funny that we're debating. Oh, should we start the number 10 wide receiver of the week or not? I would just always play both. That's what I would do if you are in that camp of Lockett and Metcalf. You know, Lockett is the biggest boomer bust player of the season, it seems like.
Teddy, let's expand on the Giants wide receivers just a bit. Darius Slayton, Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard. You know, it's the Seahawks. So they give up a lot of big plays to the wide receiver, a lot of fantasy points to go around. Are they going to go around, or do you think they're just going to be localized in one direction?
I think the name we have to focus on, even with those, is Colt McCoy. You know, and so yes, the Seahawks are giving up like the 32nd ranked, or like the worst, you know, passing defense to wide receivers or whatever in fantasy. And so you would think that like this would be a time where you should elevate Shepard, Slayton, and Tate, but Colt McCoy is throwing him the ball. And so I think that you can still throw Shepard and maybe Slayton out there, but I wouldn't go too crazy with thinking this one's going to go deep down the depth chart, especially because Evan Ingram, I think, is about to go off.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with both you and Chris. You know, during his time in Washington, Colt McCoy, he loved the tight end position, so he's definitely going to be looking that way, I believe, today for the New York Giants. Mike, dynasty for both of these teams. Who are we thinking? Giants, Seahawks.
So you might be able to get Saquon Barkley a little bit cheaper right now. He's injured. Obviously, you want him on your squad if you can get him. I still believe in Darius Slayton. To be honest with you, I love Darius Slayton a lot. Evan Ingram, people have seemed to sour on him, so he might be a good guy to grab there. For the Seattle Seahawks, I love DJ Dallas, who, according to our lads, oddly enough, is listed as their starting running back right now. There's DJ Dallas, Carlos Hyde, Travis Homer, and Chris Carson. Just looking at this currently. So that's weird. 4th rounder out of Miami. Believe in his talent a lot. DK Metcalf, just pay up for DK Metcalf. I was wrong on him, and I'm just going to admit it right now. There is a guy, a tight end, Colby Parkinson out of Stanford. He was on the injured reserve in the pup for a while. This guy is massive. He's 6'7" and 252 pounds. He's a good blocker too. Now, blocking does not get you fantasy points. What it does do is get you on the field. When you're on the field, you have a chance to play. I do want to say too, when you are acquiring players in your dynasty leagues, the IR and the practice squad is your best friend. Look at the IR and practice squad of contending teams. They will most likely move those guys for players that can help them win now and are not going to help you if you're out of contention. That's just a tidbit that I get to give to everyone that's starting in Dynasty.
I want to expand a little bit on what you said about the blocking tight end and the opportunity to get on the field. You know, when he was drafted, I believe out of Washington, University of Washington, Will Disley, famous Will Disley from a couple of seasons ago, he was drafted as a blocking tight end. And when given the opportunity, he turned into, he was fantasy relevant for those, 8 games for the past 2 seasons that he was available.
Exactly.
Just a little fun fact there. Nate, IDP purposes, what do we got here, buddy?
So Seattle, to answer Jeremy's question from earlier, Carlos Dunlap, I do love in this matchup. That Giants offensive line gives up way too many sacks, and Dunlap has played extremely well. It seems like he got a breath of fresh air when he got out of Cincinnati. And he's he's basically been in the backfield the entire time. I expect at least a sack, maybe multiple sacks this week out of him. Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams are obviously must plays each week. On the Giants side, it's Blake Martinez all day. Jabril Peppers has played extremely well. From an IDP dynasty standpoint, let's see what I'm doing here, Mike.
Love it.
Xavier McKinney is finally back on the field, who was one of my highest safeties coming in behind Jeremy Chin, and that playing time, we'll have to see how that happens. But on the defensive line, I talked about Quinnen Williams from the Jets. Another Williams in New York is Leonard Williams, who's been on this monster tear lately. If you look at the last 4 games, he has 11 tackles, 3 sacks, 12 quarterback hits. So Seattle, Russell Wilson, I believe, is the top 3 most sacked quarterback in the league. This leaves opportunity for somebody. Why not Leonard Williams? He's the second most sacked quarterback. I'm sorry.
Let me expand a little bit more on what you were saying about Jamal Adams and Bobby Wagner. Ever since Jamal Adams has come back, we've seen the ceiling capped a little bit when it comes to Bobby Wagner's tackle production. All those weeks that Jamal Adams was out, Bobby Wagner was getting you close to double-digit tackles every week. Mm-hmm. We've seen that drop a little bit since Jamal Adams has come back, since Jamal Adams basically flies everywhere around the field. Just something to keep an eye on and keep your expectations in check just a little bit. Bobby Wagner is still an elite linebacker, don't get me wrong. Right. Rams, Cardinals, Kenyon Drake. Jonathan, what do you think about Kenyon Drake against the Rams this week?
Kenyon Drake has actually quietly been doing a little bit better than he was earlier in the season. Considering how many running backs are down at the moment, I think if you have him, you're starting him because he's going to be a workhorse. I'm not too excited against this Rams defense, but I think he's got a pretty solid floor.
Is Chase Edmonds droppable now, or has he been for a while? Or
I would say so. Yeah, he's just not quite getting the work that is needed to actually start him. Maybe I wouldn't drop him if you're the Drake owner and you we're coming up to the playoffs.
Right.
So if you're the Drake owner, then yeah, I probably wouldn't.
So I'm not going to ask you this or that question for this team that I always ask you.
I actually had some really good notes on that as well.
Oh, do you? Oh, well,
come on, man! You can't not ask him the question.
Right.
I was really surprised that I got the Drake question.
So Chris, I always ask him Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods. Which week is it going to be? Is it going to be Woods' week or Cooper Kupp's week? Because they always seem to fluctuate. Okay, Jonathan, take it away.
So you're probably starting both, but
of course, yeah.
Did note down that the Cardinals have allowed some big performances to slot wide receivers. So Cole Beasley a couple of weeks ago had 11 receptions, over 100 yards and a touchdown. Jameson Crowder earlier in the year had a big week, so I'd probably go Cooper Kupp.
All right.
Would probably be the opposite now, obviously. But,
yeah.
Jonathan, or excuse me, David, who do you like for the Rams?
The running back question is this my?
It could be anybody. To be honest with you, let's start with the running back.
The running back one.
Let's go. Cam Akers, is he taking over?
I like Cam Akers. I actually think we're going to see Cam Akers be the lead dog today. I'm expecting 15 to 20 touches. He did pretty decent in the air last week, so I like him as a flex play. I'm not willing to put him as an RB2, but if you want to take a flyer in the flex, then Cam Akers is your guy.
Okay, and what about Jared Goff?
No, there's better options out there. I'd rather Colt McCoy, to be completely honest, than I would Jared Goff.
Wow,
that's a hot take.
We're gonna put that on the fantasy and frames.
Colt McCoy will outscore Jared Goff this week. Try to do it.
Oh my God, look it. All right, and obviously you're starting Nuke. Don't have to tell you that. IDP purposes, who we got here, Nate?
So Aaron Donald is that up and down each week. The biggest question mark I have in this entire game is going to be Kyler Murray's rushing attempts. If you look at the last couple of weeks, he's averaging 5 attempts per game. Prior to that, for the last 5 weeks before that, he was averaging about 11. So if he stays in the pocket because of that shoulder and he's reluctant to actually run outside, I downgrade just a little bit as far as really John Johnson III, just because he's been pretty good in terms of stopping that the quarterback anytime they run and get outside of the pocket. I do like Troy Reader. Troy Reader is honestly a crazy sneaky play because Micah Kaiser's out, and Reader, again, I think that I look at that Kyler shoulder injury as much. Maybe it's just, I don't know. Maybe he's not as injured and he's just kind of playing it up just a little bit, just being cautious for the potential playoffs. But I like Reader in the middle. Arizona side, Hassan Reddick, Jordan Hicks. I don't like, as much as we love Isaiah Simmons and another IDP dynasty player who is probably was one of the top 2 or 3 picks overall. Isaiah Simmons with playing time was fantastic. Go back a couple weeks against, was that Dallas?
It was Seattle, I believe.
Seattle, that's right. 9 tackles, I believe, and a sack. And so he looked everywhere. The problem is it required an injury to Devondre Campbell and 14 other Cardinals. So the playing time went up to about 69%. Now it's back down to like 30%. I worry about the total snaps. And then Buda Baker's a must start.
Chris, let's see if you can answer this question. Is it crazy to sit Kyler Murray for Taysom Hill this week?
No, I don't think it's unreasonable. I mean, I know we were talking about, how Hopkins, you said Lucas is a must start, right? That's what you were saying. Yeah. So I just want to make sure, but I'm even worried about that. Murray's shoulder didn't seem like it was too terrible last week. But with Hopkins going against Ramsey, who can shut people down, I'm worried about that matchup. Sam Darnold is an absolute beast. I'm worried that he's going to be having the speed to keep up with them. I'm worried that Murray's going to have a hard time. So I could see Taysom Hill being a better play, even though I still don't believe Taysom Hill is the answer in New Orleans. I think that Winston should be the starter there because I think they're built for a passing offensive team with a great running scheme.
Real quick, and maybe I wasn't paying attention, which wouldn't shock me because I'm kind of here and there. Did we talk about Larry Fitzgerald not playing today? Because
we did not talk about him not playing today.
And he is not playing. So does anybody else? Is it just me? I'm really high on Christian Kirk this week. If Fitzgerald gets the Jalen Ramsey treatment and there's no Fitz, I mean, if Hopkins gets the Jalen Ramsey and there's no Fitz, is it crazy? I think there's a high upside, high ceiling for Kirk this week.
I don't hate that at all. I like it.
No, yeah. Is it crazy to think that Andy Isabella in the slot is a crazy, DFS gamble this week? Todd, what are your thoughts there? I want to get your opinion.
You're on mute.
You're on mute. Still, there we go.
I am on mute. But yeah, no, Andy Isabella is just someone that, I mean, just living in Phoenix for the last couple of years, just watching him on, even when he does play, he's not playing enough snaps. So he's just not someone I can ever trust.
All right, Mike, from a dynasty perspective, what are we thinking?
Tell you who you can trust in the slot, Keyshawn Johnson. I like him a lot too. He was good early on in the season last year. He's actually listed as their starting slot receiver right now. And I'm looking at our lads for all of our depth charts. Their stuff's usually pretty accurate. I like him. Obviously, Kyler Murray, if you can get him. And when you're looking at the running back situation, I think Kenyon Drake's probably going to move on. Chase Edmonds is not the guy. And everyone's looking at Eno Benjamin, who was drafted in the 7th round. However, there was an undrafted rookie free agent named Jonathan Ward, who's actually been getting activated on game days over Eno Benjamin. So that's something to look into. Jonathan Ward, probably a throw-in for the Rams. Cam Akers, love that guy. I think he should probably take hold of it. Also, I tried to trade for Cam Akers in my home dynasty league, tried to trade Kenyon Drake for Cam Akers and a second to my brother-in-law to help him with his playoff push. So hopefully it doesn't work out for him because he rejected the trade. Van Jefferson was a 2nd-round pick out of Florida. He's good as well. A little bit older for a rookie. He's 24 years old, but he does have NFL pedigree. And again, if you want to do a really deep dynasty dumpster dive here, Bryson Hopkins is the 4th tight end for the Rams right now. He's behind Gerald Everett. He's behind Tyler Higbee and then some other guy I've never heard of. But again, these tight ends take a while to develop. So Bryson Hopkins out of Purdue, big guy, not anything great, but he's kind of like Albert O from Denver. He's not super fast. He's not super athletic, but he's really productive.
Yeah, you talk about 7th round running backs. I just found out that Chris Carson was drafted in the 7th round. I had no idea.
Yeah, and Fitzgerald does not care about draft capital either. He cares about putting the best player on the field, and that's another reason why I'm so high on DJ Dallas as well.
Well, let me ask you a question. Going back to the Seahawks for a second, what are your thoughts on Rashad Penny? Speaking of not caring about draft capital,
I don't have any. I think
Okay.
he's. I mean, that knee injury was pretty serious. Although I did hear that he might practice soon.
Right.
But I think drafting DJ Dallas probably pushes him out of the equation. I don't think Pete Carroll really wanted Rashad Penny. I just have that feeling that he didn't want him. I don't know why. I'm not a Seahawks fan, so
He's San Diego State guy, Rashad Penny.
he is.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Teddy, let me ask you a question really quick before we pivot to the next game. Cam Akers. Let's say the usage stays the same compared to the other running backs here on the Rams. At what point would you be okay with inserting Akers into your lineup during the fantasy playoffs, if at all? Obviously, if he gets the bulk of touches going forward, that makes sense, right? But if things stay the status quo, can you bank on him getting those long runs and that boomer bust upside? And would you trust that?
So, I mean, I think you almost can, just because if you look at the rest of their schedule after this week, if you're looking at the Rams, they've got the Patriots next week, the Jets after, and the Seahawks in week 16. So, I mean, if he can keep – I just don't know if you're ever going to be able to predict that backfield. It's almost turning into like a Bill Belichick backfield in the sense that Henderson could go off and be the hot hand. Malcolm Brown is going to be the goal line vulture, and then you're going to have to just see like what happens with Akers. So, if it stays consistent, then I mean, I think even next week, the week after, you can take a shot. But I think for now, you're still rolling Henderson.
All right. Speaking
Is
of
that a PPR question too?
It could be,
because that was one thing I even mentioned it early on in the season. Off the top of my head, I can't recall, but I think in 2019, the Rams as a team, it was 37 receptions as a team as a backfield, and Cam Akers has 3 catches on the year. So, I mean, if we're looking PPR, I think you just don't even want to look at this backfield at all.
All right. Speaking of Bill Belichick a few minutes ago, David, Cam Newton, you trusting him this week?
So say again, my mic broke up for a sec. Say again.
Yeah, I bet you are. Yeah, Cam Newton, are you trusting him this week?
Can you go to someone else? I can't hear. 1 second. I literally cannot hear. Actually, I got you now. Go.
Cam Newton.
Cam Newton. Oh, no. There are much better options. I've actually had to drop him in a few leagues. He can give you a very safe-ish floor if you're just looking for bare bones numbers, but I'm not expecting much out of him. Last week was a little bit of an off game for Cam. We've seen him go off. I mean, week 2 was obviously his best performance, nearly 400 yards, 3 in the air, 1 on the ground. And he has that potential, but he's been looking a little bit rusty lately. I think there's an injury that we're just not aware of. I don't know if his shoulder's dinged up or what have you, but very safe floor, but ceiling is also about where the floor is too.
Yeah, right now he's a poor man's Taysom Hill.
Yeah.
Wow. Who would have thought we would have said that? Chris, what are your thoughts on the running back situation here for New England? I mean, like I have to ask, right? Because it's Bill Belichick. But Damian Harris was getting a lot of the work. Sonny Michel comes back. He gets activated. Is this still Damian Harris's backfield, or do you think it's back to I have no idea who I'm playing in this backfield?
I still like Harris this week. I've been kind of a Harris believer since the beginning of the season. I was stashing him on IR for the majority of the season. I'm glad I held on to him. And then I let him go, unfortunately, in my league. But I think it's still his field. When it comes down to the end zone, it's anybody's game. It could be James White. I mean, he got it in last week instead, which is something you don't normally expect. You thought with Burke out last week, it was going to be Harris. So it's tough. The Patriots backfield is still the hardest one to predict, but I'm still playing Harris as the dominant running back for the New England Patriots.
Harris or Gore this week?
Oh, I'd still go Harris. I don't touch the Jets. Nothing against
I'd go Gore. I'd go Gore in that one.
We know you would. You take Gore over Miles Sanders this week too.
Gore or Dalvin Cook? It's Frank Gore.
Todd, wide receivers in this matchup. Obviously, Keenan Allen, you're starting for the Patriots. Huh?
Not with Cam Newton under center. Not with Cam Newton under center. I mean, he throws I'm a big Auburn fan. War Eagle all day. I love Cam Newton. He brought me a championship. But, I mean, right now, I would gamble more on him throwing an interception than I would a touchdown. So I'm not touching any Patriots wide receivers. I expect them to try to rely on the ground game. But Keenan Allen is one guy I would we saw kind of his double-digit targets drop with Austin Eckler coming back. I mean, I still think Keenan Allen is a wide receiver 1, but that is a situation I would kind of monitor.
David, let's go to you. Herbert, he had a little bit of a down week last week, his first non-20 point fantasy scoring game, I want to say, since week 4 or 5. Does he bounce back against this Patriots defense?
I mean, if that's the worst performance that Herbert's put up, you're pretty happy with that. I mean, I think he still got 2 in the air and about 200 and something. Yeah, look, he definitely bounces back. I worry they're not going to go for the deep balls as much. The Patriots secondary is actually pretty decent. I think he's going to be running a lot more this week. That front line is not a front line I'm worried about for the Patriots. So I think Herbert might even sneak in a touchdown. I'm expecting 40 or 50 on the ground rushing.
And Mike, Dynasty people.
Yeah. So for the Chargers, a bunch of people actually. Herbert, obviously, you want to get him on your roster. There's a wide receiver that is buried on the depth chart. His name is KJ Hill. Went to Ohio State. He's a really good intermediate short route runner. You get him for cheap. I'm still a believer in Joshua Kelly as well. Look at the Senior Bowl that he played in last year. He ran for over 100 yards. He's good enough to be a starting running back. He's a rookie. We got to give him some credit here. And from an IDP perspective, I'm trying to get James Derwin everywhere that I can. He's on the IR. Like I said, shop the IR to make some trades. The Patriots, sorry, David, not much. Damian Harris is the only guy I really want right now. And I'd also be interested in kicking the tires on Jacoby Myers as well. He could be a good flex or wide receiver 3 bye-week fill-in for your roster. Or, hey, if he blossoms into something better, get somebody you plug in as wide receiver 2 or 3 every week.
Nate, give us some IDP guys.
So when Chase Winovich switched from that from that down position lineman to that kind of edge stand up outside linebacker, he's done better against the run. So he's getting more playing time again. He's worthy of that intermediate, that LB2 defensive line 2-3 that you're looking for. Adrian Phillips has starting to become a must-start defensive back 2 for me every week. Juwan Bentley is coming off probably his best week that he's had as far as tackle volume because he had 16 total tackles, 6 solo. I don't love him against the Chargers, but I do like him as a solid play. On the Chargers side, obviously, after last week's Joey Bosa performance, it's hard to ever not start Joey Bosa because that's what you could get out of him at like a 30-point production on Sleeper and a lot of the other IDP scoring formats. Kenneth Murray is who I really like in this particular matchup as far as linebacker, especially considering New England's lack of ability to go anything deeper than probably 7 to 9 yards downfield. I think Murray will be all over the field there. Other than
that tackle that Bosa put on Josh Allen last week, I thought it was going to turn out pretty bad. It looked like it was if he followed through, could have been a season-ending injury. To be honest,
yeah, that alligator roll, and he's mic'd up too, so he even apologized. They were kind of pissed at him at first, thinking that he was rolling with the intent to hurt him, and he's like, it's just a big boy. I got to get him down, which is true. That's the worst part about being the defenders. If he lets Allen go, and Allen gets up and takes off for 15 yards, then they criticize him for not following through with the tackle. If he follows through with the tackle and he hurts him, then he's a dirty player. Can't wait for trying.
It's tough to play defense. I mean, I was watching the Chiefs and the Bucks last week.
The Super Bowl champion Chiefs? Is that what you're saying?
No. The Patriots are Super Bowl champions. But there was, I want to say it was Levante David went for a sack and literally didn't even use his hands, just bumped Patrick Mahomes with his chest, and they called it roughing the passer. I mean,
that's clear roughing the passer. Can't use your chest.
I don't want to say the word biased.
How many bones you have? You have 24 ribs. You have a sternum. You have 2 clavicles. That's a way too many bones to hit somebody with.
If that was on Brady, is that roughing the passer?
Yes.
Wow.
Move on.
Okay. Let's talk about cheese and cheeseheads and Packers. Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Teddy, Aaron Rodgers this week. I know he's Aaron Rodgers and he's back to form from both a real football and a fantasy football standpoint. The Eagles are actually surprisingly pretty good at getting to the quarterback and limiting fantasy production for the quarterback position. Does that concern you, or is it, ride Aaron Rodgers, ride or die type of deal?
I mean, I don't know that he's like a ride or die type of deal. I don't think that he's still retaining that, kind of like set it and forget it mentality at the quarterback position. But I still think you ride with him this week. He is playing pretty pissed off recently. So, when you can take advantage of a pissed off Aaron Rodgers, it's pretty good. Plus, I know we had a Philly fan that claimed to be one. I think.
Don't worry, I know what they are, man.
They're not very great on the old offense. So I think that I honestly think that there's still value, but like kind of top to bottom when it comes to the Packers this week, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But I think that starts with Rodgers, and I think he's going to have a good one.
Chris, what are your thoughts on Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams? Like they've been limiting Aaron Jones the past few weeks. Jamal Williams has been getting more work, but it's getting to the point in the season where fantasy football managers are legitimately concerned. Like, where's Aaron Jones from weeks 1 through 7? What's going on with this backfield?
I think that they both can be good plays for you. I think they might just be saving Aaron Jones for maybe the playoff run, and so they're trying to take away some of his reps. In fact, I was actually surprised when I was looking at Jamal Williams' stats. Even last week, it wasn't in the catching game where he did great as running back with all his carries, which is where Aaron Jones thrives. So I still think he's going to be just fine. I think he played both, really. I think he played both with confidence. Especially, you're going to love them through the fantasy playoffs. They're both facing. Well, obviously, they're facing 3 the bottom 10 defenses. It's going to be just a cupcake schedule for them. They have like the second best one behind Derrick Henry. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, Detroit,
he's
Carolina, Tennessee.
Taking a Latavius Murray role, I feel, Jamal Williams, the equivalent of Kamara and Latavius Murray. And I think that stays through the whole
comparison.
Well, let's talk about the Latavius Murray, Jamal Williams role. Is that what Jordan Howard's walking into this week with Miles Sanders having been activated to the active roster for the Philadelphia Eagles, David?
Oh, sweet Lord. We're not talking about Howard, are we? No way. I mean, it's Miles Sanders. I'm not overly confident. I understand the Packers are, the cake matchup that you want, but Sanders has been a little bit hot and cold. I feel it's game script dependent. If somehow the Eagles can get off to a lead, then I think Sanders blows up for 150-plus yards and a couple of touchdowns. But they really need that positive game script in order for Sanders to really be effective.
And obviously for wide receiver, you're starting with confidence, Devonta Adams. Let's just shoot through this game really quickly because we got a few more games to go through before we get to the 12:30 spot on the East Coast here. Dynasty options. Mike, what are your thoughts?
So I'm still picking up Aaron Rodgers anywhere I can. And everyone's like, oh, he's 37. This is dynasty. Yeah, but sometimes you need to win now. Drew Brees is still playing. Tom Brady is still playing. People seem to forget that Aaron Rodgers had a bunch of years at the beginning of his career where he did not play. So he's, in years of getting hit, he's younger than other guys that are his age. Aside from that, Aaron Jones is going to move on, I'm assuming. I don't think they can afford him. But Jamal Williams looks to be the guy who's next in line. I think he has standalone value, much like Latavius Murray does. I'm all out on A.J. Dillon. I just don't see it. Didn't like him at Boston College. Obviously, Devontae Adams is the only wide receiver on that team I want. I do like Jay Sternberger as well. He's been a little bit disappointing to me this year. On the Eagles side, still a believer in Jalen Reagor, Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders. You could get Carson Wentz for cheap right now because everyone thinks that Jalen Hurts is going to be a thing, Nate. But if you watch film on Jalen Hurts, man, he doesn't have it. He's not the answer. The answer is a real offensive coordinator. The answer is a good game script. And when you have a struggling quarterback and a bad offensive line, don't throw the ball 45 times a game. If you think you're going to lose,
I can't believe they didn't take Justin Jefferson. They had the choice of Justin Jefferson, and they went with Jalen Reagor.
Yeah, I actually didn't hate that pick. Although Justin Jefferson got branded as a slot-only guy, but that's only true in his last year at LSU. Prior to that, he played outside, he played inside, he played everywhere, so he can do everything.
His sophomore year, he went nuts outside.
Exactly. They did try to trade up to 16 with Atlanta to get CeeDee Lamb. Unfortunately, Atlanta didn't budge. They took a cornerback who I think had a second-round grade, something like that. So CeeDee Lamb fell to Dallas, which, it is what it is. I didn't like their second-round pick, obviously. You got to take somebody that can help your team win now. And aside from that, the rest of their draft was just kind of meh. You drafted a bunch of special teamers and wide receivers that suck.
Nate, IDP options.
Brandon Graham is one who I typically like quite a bit, not so much against this Green Bay offensive line, who is pretty stingy to opposing defensive end, defensive linemen. Alex Singleton has played extremely well once they unfortunately lost Nathan Gary. So that's, disappointing to say the least. On Green Bay's side, Kenny Clark is a monster in the middle against Philadelphia's offensive line or whatever it is. I think Cora here could probably get through and get a sack or two, if not 3. Christian Kirksey is a stud.
She's got a little Eagles outfit on right here. Can you wave hi? Wave hi.
Hi, Cora.
Hey, Cora.
And Adrian Amos. That rounds out. Actually, no, I take that back. Zadarius Smith is maybe one of the best plays. How did I forget that against this Philadelphia? Sorry. I got distracted by, pretty
the cute
Cora.
baby.
I know. So Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith might be one of the best plays on the week. Sorry.
All right. Well, Nate, let me just stick with you because it'll go relatively quickly.
Okay.
Broncos, Chiefs. Give us
Not
both
much.
sides of the ball. I mean, not much. I don't know if you heard of this guy. His name's Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. Is Clyde Edwards-Helaire slated to start today, or are you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
They don't think the illness that he has is that bad that they're going to play him. And
Stomach issue, correct?
yeah, exactly.
You
Yeah.
take some Pepto for that.
Little
What
bubble
about-
guts.
He's fine.
About IDP for the Chiefs.
I mean, Daniel Sorensen, maybe Frank Clark could get into this Denver backfield, but not much outside of that, realistically, on a consistent basis. Denver, Bradley Chubb, Malik Reed, either one of those two could potentially get to Mahomes. Mahomes has a tendency to, stay in the pocket if he can try to get that downfield ball. And he takes a sack occasionally here and there, but it's worth the payoff. And A.J. Johnson over the middle, I think, should have close to double-digit tackles.
David, are you a fan of Drew Lock this week?
Mm-hmm.
You are.
No. There are better options out there. I mean, we're talking about Kirk Cousins. I'd way rather Kirk Cousins.
I'd rather go 31 other quarterbacks.
What's
Fair
so
enough.
funny?
Philip, stop
Yeah.
it. Look, the only reason why I
I'll
was
take
high
Kendall
on Drew
Hinton
Lock
over him.
is game script. The game script favors him in garbage time points this week. That's the only reason why I'm high on Drew Lock this week.
I got it.
From a running back
Fancy
perspective,
only.
Teddy, what's up?
I was just going to say, Fant's the only one who I would remotely trust there. I think he'll give you a safe floor, but I'm not expecting monster numbers.
Well, let me segue to Teddy. Philip Lindsay is going to be playing this week. Does that cap both him and Melvin Gordon's upside?
I think so. I've been down on Melvin Gordon for literal weeks, and then he had 1 week where he had like 84 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he has been absolutely atrocious other times. So I don't think he has anymore. I mean, I think the last time he played Kansas City, he put up a decent game, but I still prefer Lindsay just from the use of the garbage time, as you mentioned.
Todd, really quickly, wide receivers for the Broncos. Anybody?
I'm not trusting any this week. I'd rather so many other options than trusting the Broncos offense at all.
All right. Mike, dynasty options here. What do we got?
I'll make this quick. For the Chiefs, the only guy I'm trying to actively acquire because everyone's too expensive on the Chiefs is Mecole Hardman. For the Denver Broncos, Drew Lock is cheap right now. Alberto on IR, big athletic, somewhat athletic. Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, Cortland Sutton, and KJ Hamler. All guys I'm trying to actively acquire right now.
All right.
There's a
Let's
lot
go to
there.
my favorite matchup of the week. We got the football team taking on the Steelers. Terry McLaurin, obviously, a must start in this matchup if you have him on your roster. But is Antonio Gibson a lock against the Steelers defense, or could we see some J.D. McKissick this week? Jonathan, what are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll preface this by saying that I love Antonio Gibson, try to draft him everywhere I could. But I am a little bit worried this week, just considering the percentage of points that he gets from touchdowns compared to just, rushing yards or receiving yards. And, Washington are one of 6 teams to have scored more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns. And the Steelers have allowed the second fewest rushing touchdowns this year. So I am a little bit concerned. I think you're probably still playing him, but I just maybe temper expectations slightly.
For the Steelers, no James Conner. He's still out with COVID. Benny Snell, or as David calls him, Benny Smells, is there. Teddy,
Benny
let's go back
stinks,
to you.
actually.
Oh, God. Okay. Anyhow, Teddy, let's go back to you. Benny Snell against a tough Washington front seven. Strictly a volume carry kind of play, right? Stable floor, you think?
I think the stable floor is there, but I mean, he's not going to have an easy one going up against the third best, defense and fantasy against running backs. This is a Washington football team that obviously game script depicted this a little bit, but they shut down Zeke last week. You know who's not Zeke? Benny Snell. And so I think from the volume, you're probably going to throw him out there, but I didn't rush to waivers to pick him up.
Chris, Ben Roethlisberger, again, we talked about this front seven of the Washington football team. He's certainly going to be under duress this week. Does that downgrade a lot of the receiving options for the Steelers, or do you still feel pretty confident starting Claypool, Johnson, and Juju?
No, actually, I'm 100% down for Claypool or Johnson. If you actually look at the Washington football team stats, they have given up the second most 40-plus yard plays. So that's what the Steelers are. They play guys. So if the Washington's giving up the second most in the league, I'm going to rock with either one of those guys, no problem.
Nice. All right. Dynasty options for this team, or for these teams, rather, Mike.
Got a bunch for Washington. Antonio Gibson, Steven Sims Jr., Antonio Gandy Golden, Kelvin Harmon is on IR. And by the way, people said that Ryan Finley was accurate. Kelvin Harmon made him look good at NC State. Watch the film. It's there. Bryce Love could be a throw-in for any trade. He's been on IR his entire career. He has the talent, too. For the Steelers, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, although those are two guys that the prices keep going up. You could probably get James Washington relatively cheaply right now. I think Juju moves on. James Washington is a wide receiver 3. Good report, Big Ben. And aside from that, Benny Snell is not it. James Conner, always hurt. Feel bad for the guy. I love the story, but I love Anthony McFarland Jr. Watch his film against Ohio State. He just went crazy. He could be a good change of pace guy for whoever they bring in, unless they bring in Najee Harris, in which case, which I hope they do, he will not leave the field.
Nate, IDP options here for both sides?
Yeah, Washington, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, both options there, especially if Pittsburgh plans on throwing the ball 45-plus times like they seem to have this affinity to do so. The only one that I'm really high on as far as starting has been Cameron Curl. Every single week he's been a defensive back one that he's really filled in for Landon Collins. Really like him. Problem is he also plays up, quite a bit, which leads into that whole 40-plus pass yards at Pittsburgh. Should potentially take advantage of because there's no one else back deep to prevent that from happening. On the Pittsburgh side, how much time we got, guys? We got another half hour here. I could probably go through everybody on that team. Then the biggest loss they took is Bud Dupree. The biggest benefactor of that's probably going to be Alex Highsmith. Alex Highsmith comes in most likely with the attention being on the other side. Stephon Tuitt should play this game. I believe he was activated and good to go. That means interior pressure, attention to TJ Watt. That leaves Highsmith on the outside to potentially just constant one-on-ones. I like that quite a bit. And Robert Spillane each week has been a kind of a must-start as well.
All right, let's go Bills, 49ers. The Bills left tackle, he got injured last week. I don't know what his status is for this week. But, the 49ers front seven, they're starting to reassert themselves as a dominant pass rush. Are you concerned with Josh Allen this week, David?
Absolutely. I'm not too high on Allen. I mean, I know you've got a couple of leagues with Herbert. I would way rather Herbert over Allen this week. We saw what happened, against the Chargers, where his floor was just getting lower and lower.
Okay. Now, obviously, there's not really a running back that you're feeling comfortable with, whether it's single carry or Zach Moss. For wide receiving options, look, Stephon Diggs. He has a tough matchup this week. Maybe Sherman will be paired off with him. Todd, who's a wide receiver for the Bills or 49ers for that matter that you feel comfortable starting?
I mean, Stephon Diggs is obviously a must start. I would say the only other wide receiver that you could look at for the Bills would be Gabby Davis. I mean, when John Brown's out, he's performed. I even know one of the games he got a touchdown called back, and then Isaiah McKenzie scored it right after. And that was a game John Brown missed. So, I mean, with John Brown out, I think Gabby Davis always has a little bit of upside.
Is there anybody for the 49ers? Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk?
Well, I would say both of those guys are more running backs for them. I mean, we see what the 49ers offense looks like. It's screen passes, shuttle passes, that kind of stuff. I'm just never comfortable starting them. I'd rather we see what the Bills give up against running backs. I just think it's going to be Raheem Mostert and company all day.
Mike, excuse me. I almost said Dynasty. Dynasty options, please.
Yeah, I just want to say that looking at our lads, Kevin White is on the 49ers practice squad, and I just find that humorous. We'll start with the Saints.
Kevin White.
Yeah, throwback. He is actually from the area that I live in. When he goes to Costco, he gets heckled. I just want to let everyone know that as well. I'm a Brandon Ayuk over Debo Samuel guy. I'm out on Debo Samuel. Hurt too much. I think they move on from Jordan Reed, so Ross Dwelly's a guy I like. George Kittle gets banged up a lot. JaMychal Hasty, unrestricted rookie free agent. He's a guy that, you know that they love to just plug guys in and play at running back. They're going to get rid of a bunch of these guys. JaMychal Hasty could be a good ad, as well as Jalen Hurd, who's currently on IR. For the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, of course, people are souring on him for whatever reason. Zach Moss is the guy to own in that backfield going forward, I believe. And Gabriel Davis out of UCF, I think he's their wide receiver 2 next year, paired alongside Stephon Diggs. I don't think John Brown's going to be back. So it could be Diggs, Gabriel Davis, and Cole Beasley.
Nate, IDP options for this game?
Kerry Hyder Jr. is in a good matchup now. Cody Ford, left tackle, blindside for Josh Allen, is out for the rest of the season. They're filling in with basically nothing there. So Hyder does have a good matchup. Fred Warner's an every week starter, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe an LB2, but still a starter. On the Buffalo side, Tremaine Edmonds is the same way. We talked about earlier, if there's no Matt Milano, AJ Klein has stepped in and has been nothing short of. He's actually like the LB2 over that time that he's been in as a starter. I don't expect the number 2 overall production, but I do see potential LB1, LB2 upside. And then Jordan Poyer has been a beast as well at safety, so he's a plug and play.
All right, in the final game this week, we got the Cowboys, we got the Ravens on Tuesday. Lamar Jackson is being activated. He will be a go. This week will he be a go
Is
in
that
your
official?
fantasy? That is
Is
official.
that official?
No Mark Andrews.
No Mark Andrews, so he is out. Is Lamar Jackson a go on your roster if you have him, Chris?
Yeah, I would have to say so. I don't have as much input for that one. I just think it's
it's fine. I mean, he has the obvious upside. We all seen his upside last season. Obviously, There's been a dip this season. But in terms of like streaming options, if Ryan Tannehill, for example, was on your waiver wire, which I don't think you should, would you start Tannehill over Lamar Jackson? Given the matchup versus the Cowboys?
Yeah, I mean, so whenever you have rushing yards like that, it can really help you out with Lamar Jackson. I mean, that's a big thing. The only bad thing is he's missing his number 1 weapon right now. Mark Andrews being out. That's the only thing. It's the only thing I can see on him.
Todd, wide receiver matchup, wide receivers here to talk about. Can you trust any Cowboys wide receiver?
The only one you could probably trust is Amari. He's had 1 down week all year. But on the flip side, the Ravens, I mean, they're going up against the Cowboys. Cowboys have given up 19 touchdowns against wide receivers, most in the league. So, we saw Hollywood break one off last week late in the game against the Steelers. So, if anything, I think Hollywood could break one out. And honestly, even we could see some Willie Snead even with Mark Andrews out.
Teddy, let me ask you a question.
I'm playing CD.
You're playing CD Lamb
in my Frank Gore league because my team name is CD's Nuts. I can't have the name CD's Nuts and not play CD Lamb.
We have had a very
we almost got out of the show.
You almost did. Teddy, I'm going to ask you a question that I don't think it sounds unreasonable to ask, but it's worth asking. For the Dolphins, Myles Gaskins is coming back. He should be taking over the bulk of the carries there. Would you feel more comfortable starting Myles Gaskin over Ezekiel Elliott at this point?
So the only reason that I'm still leaning Zeke, which this is going to be a ridiculous reason to show you how dire the situation is that when Tua is the quarterback, Gaskin and the running backs haven't been as involved through the air. Whereas when Fitzmagic was under center, it was like Miles free money Gaskin on his reception overs because he would put up 7-8 a game. I think it's close, which is, I think, the sad part about this. But I think you almost could go Gaskin over Zeke.
All right, Todd, let's answer Jeremy's question. In a flex in a non-PPR league, you flexing Pittman or Corey Davis this week?
A non-PPR. I'd honestly still probably just go Corey Davis just because, like I said, I don't want to trust any Colts wide receivers yet. I mean, with Phillip Rivers under center. But Corey Davis has been pretty consistent, and I mean, even he's had a couple back-to-back 80-yard games, so I think he could be a solid option.
He has three touchdowns. I think Pittman only has one. So, I mean, touchdown upside, I guess, too. Ugh.
Corey Davis.
Yeah, that's a tough choosing, but yeah.
Nate, let's finish. Or excuse me, Mike. Dynasty options here.
So for Dallas, I'm going to try to buy Dak right now while he's hurt and uncertainty. A lot of people say he's going to be back, but hey, he might go, you didn't want to pay me last year. You're not going to pay me this year. Maybe he goes to like England or the Raiders or something like that. Look pretty good there. CeeDee Lamb is the only guy, him and Michael Gallup are the two guys I'm trying to get out of that wide receiver core. Try to get Zeke or Tony Pollard. They're both fantastic talents at the running back position. Zeke's value is down right now. For the Baltimore Ravens, a lot of people say no one likes the wide receivers for the Ravens. I disagree. I like Devin Duvernay and James Prochet. We all know Lamar Jackson is not the most accurate quarterback. So if they put in Trace McSorley, who has the best passer rating in the NFL, they might do better. Try to get J.K. Dobbins if you could afford him. And if you can't, get Justice Hill. If you look at the way the Baltimore Ravens, and you have to look at how teams play, especially in Dynasty, so you know how to get these guys. They never just roll out one running back. It's usually a slew of guys. Ingram should be gone. Gus is going to be gone. Gus Edwards should be a starting running back somewhere, I believe. So it should be J.K. Dobbins, and Justice Hill should be the number 2 guy. He looked decent against the Steelers last week, and the time that he got, get him for dirt cheap right now.
Trace McSorley, your Penn State allegiance knows no bounds. All right, Nate finishes off with IDP, please.
MVP.
Did you guys listen to that Trace McSorley song?
Not
It's
yet.
terrible. Just don't waste your time. It's awful.
It's terrible. Unfortunately, I had already heard it before. And it's the only reason why his jersey's actually probably outselling the majority of the jerseys of the players on the rest of that team outside of Lamar Jackson is bad. But either way, IDP side, Patrick Queen has been maybe, again, Baltimore strikes draft lottery, and Patrick Queen's a must-start linebacker there. Chuck Clark was dynamic last week. David, you remember that? He had about 17 IDP points. That's what you would have needed for you to lose. I beat David in IDP league with Chuck Clark, by the way, last week in TJ Watt. So I will digress.
Last minute,
yeah, it's true. A sneaky play is Derek Wolfe in the middle against his Dallas Cowboys offensive line, which is pretty porous. So Chuck Clark, Derek Wolfe, Patrick Queen, Dallas, Leighton Vander Esch, Jalen Smith are 2 linebacker kind of must start there. Donovan Wilson has been playing good at safety. One person we have to pay attention to is Aldon Smith. If Aldon Smith is out, there's talks with him being ill. Maybe move up Randy Gregory unless he assaults someone between now and Tuesday night or whatever night it is. Potentially move him and DeMarcus Lawrence up as well. Hopefully no one is assaulted by Randy Gregory.
Yes, hopefully no one is assaulted by Randy Gregory. And with that, I want to thank everybody for being on the Four-Eyed Pregame show this week. Chris Holscher, you can find him on YouTube at Fantasy Football Huddle. Thank you very much for joining us. We got to get you back on the show ASAP, and definitely going to be talking with you during the off season. Teddy is awesome talking to you as well. All the Frames crew. David, thank you very much for being our adopted brother. Michael Bauer of the Dynasty Rewind podcast. Thank you as always.
Thanks for having me.
For all you Four-Eyed fans, thank you for watching. Good luck this week, and next week we'll be talking fantasy playoffs. So take care and good luck.
DJ Moore.